Welcome everybody to this emergency meeting of the Purple Flag Forum. It's great that so many of you can join us today. I think it's probably a testament to this particular issue we're going to be discussing, which is the issue of drink spiking and what needs to be our response as an industry, as a collaboration, as a partnership. So from ATCM's point of view, reports of drink spiking started to come in pretty much from September time onwards. So we're looking at around the time we saw the reopening of the evening and nighttime economy again. And one of the things we have feared now for a few months, and I know we've discussed this on the Purple Flag Forum previously, is this overlap between the capacity of the evening and nighttime economy because of changes in staffing, an issue which hasn't gone away, and also there's some 800,000 people who would have reached drinking age during lockdown who might be potentially quite vulnerable if they're going out and drinking at the same time. Not least then you have reopening not too far off around when Freshers Week is going to come in. So there's lots of challenges there. And our fear has always been, will we get that issue, which then becomes a real challenge for us to be able to manage because of the situation we find ourselves in post-pandemic. So the reports have started coming in about drink spiking. It's not just drink spiking, there is also actual physical spiking as well, injections, which really is scary. There was, I think it's yesterday, there was a launch of a YouGov survey which said 1 in 9 women thought that they had their drink spiked, and a third of women knew someone who had been spiked. Now that's potentially very scary. And on top of that now, we see this almost transference of vulnerability from the users of the evening nighttime economy to the businesses, because we know the businesses are struggling thanks to the pandemic. And when you get issues like this, which make people think differently about using the nighttime economy, and we've even seen boycotts from certain groups as well. Ultimately, what we have here is a potential lose-lose situation where you have people who are far too exposed in terms of our evening and nighttime economy, and businesses who are also far too exposed to the economic impact of that. So it's something we've absolutely got to face head on. So I'm not going to do any lengthy introduction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight over to our speakers. So with us today, we've got David Moore with Devon and Cornwall Police Force, who covers Plymouth. We've got Keith Rundle, who's Director of Bids in Bristol. But we're going to start off with Mike Kill, CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association, who's going to give us the industry perspective on drink spiking. So Mike, do you want to give us your perspective on the issue?
Thanks, OJ, and thanks, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Well, Doug, thanks for giving me this opportunity. And it's really interesting, the work that we've been doing as a trade body, sitting within the Home Office and policing meetings, particularly around the MPCC, and also Scottish Government meetings on spiking. The situation as we see it historically is something that's been around for 20, 30 years. I think someone said that it started in about 1903, this sort of situation. But the reality is these crimes are unacceptable in any format. And in particular, when you talk about spiking via needles, it's a huge worry. But I think the one thing that I really wanted to do within my part in this is just put a bit of perspective in place. Now, the sad and worrying part about this, there's lots of, there are many reported cases coming through. There's a lot of anecdotal discussions and conversations that are going on in the background, both from, cross genders, both, male and female experiences of, and LGBT experiences of spiking, which is a huge worry and a huge concern. We are very, we understand very clearly that 80%, according to polls, happen to women. And, it's creating this huge fear among people going out into the nighttime economy, which we've had some quite consistent and robust conversations with the police and the Home Office about. So what I really wanted to say was, look, we've seen this across many years, many decades, particularly in my time as an operator. But the one thing that we always see on an annual basis is a huge increase around the freshers period of drink spiking in particular. As you can appreciate, needle spiking is a new adage to this, but we traditionally see an increase around the freshers period. And I think Bristol and the work that Keith and Carly have done, where they were very proactive in understanding that this was going to be an issue prior the escalation of reportings, were very much ahead of the curves. And similar, Dave Moore, with the work that he was doing in Cornwall and Devon, put us in a position where they were already predicting a perfect storm, as was the Met, because you had 850,000 new 18-year-olds that had not been able to go out for almost two years, particularly the fact that they'd just come of age, coupled with the fact that festival season was all but not there. So they had a lot of pent-up desire to go out and socialise and engage and take an active part in a social life that they'd been starved of, and particularly as they'd been waiting for many years in those early ages of not being able to express themselves and go out to social spaces, pubs, bars, restaurants, clubs, cultural experiences. So I think there was a lot of pent-up positioning, and with those 850,000 new 18-year-olds, without a doubt, we have seen some concern around them understanding their capacity. There's a certain level of naivety. The feedback that we've had from many of the clubs out there is that there are some quite unique questions which show the naivety of some of these people experiencing the nighttime economy, albeit a challenge. Now, what we are seeing at the moment, and something the NTIA has been driving towards, is for us to really tackle this crime effectively, we really need to understand or benchmark the breadth of the issue. So our work has been driven towards central government, asking the Home Office to come forward with a robust report of legacy crimes within these categories, so that we can, one, understand the breadth of the situation, and then we can also start to understand the characteristics of the crimes. So when we talk about characteristics, we talk about what are the settings that are most prevalent, who are the target, what is the end crime, what are they using, what the breadth of the toxicology that's being used, so that we can really start making up a stronger understanding of these crimes, so that we can tackle them effectively as a part of a bigger sort of society. Now, some of the things that we've had some sort of behind the door discussions with the police, and while much of the industry has been vilified or it's been targeted amongst nightclubs, what's becoming very clear is that nightclubs are not the only sort of bed for this. And there is also very clearly a misunderstanding of the breadth of this. And I'll give you some sort of, I suppose, off the record discussions that have sort of come back. We've seen data that suggests that 35% of these crimes occur within illegal parties, house parties, and halls parties that sort of take place. And without a doubt, our industry has got to take a very clear accountability and responsibility for our part to play in it. But what it does clarify is that there is a wider societal issue that needs a collective response, not an individual response or a direct response that we saw from the likes of Midlothian just outside of Edinburgh, suggesting that licenses were going to be taken away if effective management of spiking didn't take place. So where we are at the moment, and I'll sort of allude to a couple of other stats that have sort of come about. Where we are at the moment is we've got an industry that are very much under pressure from the pandemic. We've reacted very quickly to the spiking incidents, the escalation in reports, through training, through overt campaigns to highlight, the abhorrent crime, the fact that people are being watched, what the crime will mean if you get caught and you get convicted, and the prison terms, but also talking about conscious bystanders, and the collective responsibility of not only the businesses and the key stakeholders, including policing, to take an active responsibility, but also that we as a community that come out and socialise need to take an active responsibility with this, alongside many other cases in different environments. We actually collectively cannot stand and allow this to happen around us. And the stronger we stand together, the more impact we're going to have in dealing with this. When we start to talk about some of the mitigations that we put in place, we've had all sorts of challenges, from the mechanical barriers or the drink condoms to spikies that, just for information, sustainable paper straws don't go through the top if they crumble. So, we're having battles with sustainability against, public safety and protecting people from being spiked. So there are so many challenges out there at the moment. It's a real concern that at present there is somewhat of a vilification of particularly nightclubs, when we know that there are other settings that are out of controlled environments, out of regulated environments, that also need to be addressed. And this has to come down to a community being active as well as an industry being active. And without a doubt, with the release of the SWAN money from the Home Office, coupled with the proactive response from the industry, coupled with policing taking a very proactive response, I think we're moving in the right direction. But there are several things that concern ourselves, our industry, and one of them is intelligence on this crime. So I think, without sort of going any further than this, I think the biggest thing that we can achieve at the moment, alongside the short-term mitigations that are being put in place and initiatives that everyone's working on, is to really drive the Home Office to come forward with a very clear understanding of these crimes, the breadth of these crimes, so that we can then start to really have a benchmark position to deal with the characteristics that we're dealing with. And I'll give you one example. If we go out and start buying drink testing kits, while we appreciate that there is a deterrent element of this and a safeguarding element, and I'm sure me and Dave have had some conversation around it, but until we understand the breadth of the toxicology that are being, or the drugs that are being used to commit these crimes, we're not going to be able to pick up a test that covers everything. And also bear in mind that most of the time alcohol is the culprit for spiking, and that's not going to take a test. So I think we've got some really big challenges here. And just two last things I just want to bring up. In terms of needle injected spiking, according to policing at the moment, there has been no paraphernalia. Although there have been cases reported, there's been no paraphernalia around needles or drink spiking equipment caught or seized or as a part of a crime. There's been no toxicology to suggest that a victim has anything in their system, and I appreciate there's a very short window there. But the other thing that I think is a challenge is what the motive is. So while the reports have suggested that these crimes are being presented, the motive around these crimes is not present. There doesn't seem to be a lead-on motive in terms of sexual harassment, robbery, etc., which you would usually find in spiking, which the police are finding very difficult to sort of understand. And the last thing, just to say that according to forensic toxicology, out of 100 cases that are being presented, they are suggesting that only 5% of those cases that go through to toxicology are being presented as positive test results to suggest that there has been an ingested drug that could be a potential crime. And of those, there is a reduced amount, again, from those 5 out of every 100 that would suggest that those out of those 5, there are even less that are actually, with further investigation, something which would result in a further criminal investigation. So I think we have got some very challenging press positioning on vilification of certain industries, how we present ourselves, which I'm sure everyone can understand is, we all want to be very proactive. We all want to make sure that these are being taken seriously, and work very hard to ensure that people can go out and feel safe. But we've got a mix here of without a doubt, crimes that are happening, but also a fear of crime. And I'll give you an example that I heard yesterday, and sadly, this is a case that we are seeing more often rather than not, is someone highlighting to a senior director of a large company that turned around and said, "Look, I've had my drink spiked. What will you do about it?" And he highlighted all these things. And the people that she CC'd into the email then responded and CC'd him in a circular, and highlighted the fact that she should go out into social media and drive the narrative. But the interesting part about it is they were willing to talk to press, willing to do social media, but they weren't willing to speak to the police. And that's a growing concern, that this is becoming a press frenzy, that is becoming more about the rhetoric than it is about dealing with the crime. So I'm going to park it there, and I hope that's okay, OJ, as a perspective. But, I'm very keen to get to a point that we collectively work on this, but I think it's got to start with a very clear basis of information that we can work from.
Mike, as always, that's really useful insight, and I'm appreciative that you're doing this while being on the move. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. If you can hang around, great. Understand if you got to go, but if you can hang around, great. I want to bring other speakers in. There's so much you've mentioned in there. I think firstly, the issue of intelligence is a big one, and that's where I want to bring Dave more in just a second. But you've also just touched on there the issue of trust, especially in police at the moment. And that was something which has been picked up by the YouGov poll. So this YouGov poll, what I'll do is I'll put the link to this in the chat box in just a second. But there is a specific question in there about whether the police would take someone seriously if they reported an issue of drink spiking, and it's clear that it's split. So there's not 100% confidence that if a girl or a woman would go to the police with a reported incident, that they feel that they would be taken seriously over the issue. And that's a challenge in itself. And I know it's one of the things Dave Moore has actually been looking into. So Dave, at this point, can I bring you in to talk about what you've done for Plymouth around the issue of drink spike and around that issue of intelligence and building trust?
Yeah, thanks, OJ. There's a lot of points that Mike raised there, which I completely agree with. And I think the first question, and this was raised with us in 2018, again, at Freshers, where a student in Falmouth had said that she had been spiked. And it was on the back of that when I looked into how we were criming this and how the police were reacting to spiking allegations that led to us to run our trial in Plymouth back in 2019. So we ran a 3-month trial, looking at every allegation that was made, and we put in a working practice, which basically supplied venues with drink testing kits and police officers with urine testing kits. And this simple working practice basically gave officers and venue staff a simple flowchart to go through on how they should react and how they should deal with people. Now, what we needed to do, and the big question about this is what is going on with regards to drink spiking? Is it real? How prevalent is it? And as Mike says, what venues are being targeted? What methods are being used? What drugs are being used? All of those are really important factors, because in order to prevent a crime or an incident happening, we need to know what the methodology is behind that and how that actually works. So we undertook this trial where about 300,000 people have probably gone through the venues, that's as a guesstimate using the door clickers, through about 38 venues over 3 months. And we came back with a total of 4, what we would call full positive tests. Now that means that it was tests that people had either in their drink or in their system of something they hadn't voluntarily taken, because the urine test would also pick up things that people had voluntarily taken. So on the back of that, I wrote a report, which I think, OJ, you've got, which sort of summed up what the situation looked like in Plymouth. And we got some funding then to roll it out across the whole of Devon and Cornwall. Now, obviously, COVID did its job and shut everything down for quite a while. So we started this on the 1st of August. So it gave the venues 2 weeks to reopen. And what we did, we had urine testing kits put to every single police station in Devon and Cornwall for officers to use. But also, I think it's about 209, in fact, more than that now, probably about 220 venues throughout the force area were given drink testing kits. Obviously, every late night venue in the force area has got them. And what we did, we put across the fact that this working practice needed to be followed, which is an important part of what Mike has just brought up and what you just brought up yourself, OJ, and the confidence in people in reporting these incidents. Now, the idea behind it is that we were having so many people previously who were going onto social media and saying, I've been spiked. Now, if they've got 100 friends, there's 100 people now who know someone's been spiked or think they know someone who's been spiked. And that was the issue, that if you do a poll and say, do you know someone who's been spiked, 100 people will then say, yes, I do. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to get more relevant data on what the situation was like. And so by having the police as a reporting platform, but also the venues as a reporting platform. So a bit of basic training to the venues, we gave them the guidance. So if anybody thinks the drink has been spiked, or if they feel that they've been spiked themselves, they are now going to venue staff. And what we have found over the last 3 months, because I've now got 3 months worth of data, which I'm just still sifting through, but I'm looking at a lot of the anecdotal stuff from the incident logs that we've gone to. And what we have found is that people are now a lot more confident to go to door staff, bar staff, glass collectors, whoever are within the venue, as well as police, to report the fact that there is something wrong. Either they've been spiked, their friend's been spiked, or the drink tastes funny. So they're having the confidence to go to the industry, as well as having the confidence to call the police. Now, we've also found, because we've set this up as an operation right across the force area, that officers now are much more attuned to what is going on. They're aware of what's going on. So our communications department is, so they will direct officers on what they need to do. So officers are going to these allegations, and rather than just saying, okay, you're just drunk, they're now actually dealing with it. They're finding that the kits are very easy to use. And again, looking through all of the logs, the emails that I've had back from officers, the anecdotal evidence coming back from the people who they've been dealing with is they are really pleased that they've been taken seriously, firstly. Secondly, if it comes back as a negative test, they're really reassured that nothing untoward appears to have happened to them. And the same is being said of venues. Now, I'm getting some feedback from people who've reported it to venue staff, and then the police turn up, and they're saying they're really pleased that the venue staff have taken it seriously. Now, this to me is a win-win. This is where that narrative can be turned around by using venues and venue staff as a first reporting point of contact as such, will hopefully change that narrative, because the whole point of using nighttime economy staff is the fact that you've got that capable guardian there. And as Mike quite rightly says, the bigger concern are those house parties, the halls parties, where there is no capable guardian. There's no one to go to if you feel ill or unwell. Who's going to take you home? Quite possibly the perpetrator. It's going to be much more dangerous. Whereas if you are in a venue, you've got someone who you can go to, who will then call the police, and then you can be dealt with and you can be looked after from a welfare perspective. So the big question that the people are asking at the moment is, what are you doing about drink spiking? Now, what we put in place at the moment is a way that people feel reassured, that they feel believed when they report it to us. And I think that is a big win to start with. It's also given us a much bigger picture about what is going on. So, for example, I can't give out too much data at the moment because I haven't fully finalised everything, but we've noticed that 80% of allegations are in our 3 university towns and cities. So that's Exeter, Plymouth and Falmouth. Now, we have other big nighttime economies like Torbay and Newquay, and we're getting hardly any allegations coming from those 2 venues. So we're seeing certain patterns, we're seeing certain age groups, we're seeing certain genders. So we're able to start dissecting a little bit and looking at methods that are being used. Now, the whole point again of what Mike was saying is getting that data stream so we know what kind of thing we're looking at. And as we found in our trial, you're looking at 4% positive rate. That matches up with what Mike is saying is going through toxicology at the moment. It's one of those issues that I think that the industry has an opportunity here to almost say, this is what we're doing. We're targeting perpetrators, so by putting good signage up, and I know Keith's got some cracking signs in Bristol as well, but by putting signs up at venues. I've just been to a student bar today, in fact, in Plymouth, and every wall has 2 signs on it saying, get your drink tested here. It's really, people are aware that they can go into that venue and they can feel that much safer. It's a safer place to go. So by putting that in the minds of customers, but also by targeting the perpetrators by saying, right, hang on a minute, staff in this venue are aware about drink spiking. Not only that, if somebody thinks their drink tastes funny, they can go to a member of staff. The member of staff, if that comes back positive, or the person feels ill and police are called and it comes back as a positive test, where we've always lost out in the past from an investigative point of view is we lose that early investigation. And that has always been the problem. When we have an early investigation, we've got much more chance of catching a perpetrator. The biggest deterrent to a perpetrator is being caught. So if we can commence an early investigation, so we find a drink that's positive, as we did in our trial, we found a drink that was positive, the victims were from out of town, but fortunately, because we had early interaction, we could identify them, we identified the perpetrator and he was arrested. Already, we've had 4 people being searched and 1 arrest through our trial, through our Devon and Cornwall, because of that early interaction. Someone's drink tasted positive, test positive, police turn up and detain people and search them. And say 1 was arrested as a result, because we've got that really quick investigation, and that is the deterrent. So what we're doing, we're trying to focus this now on the perpetrator. And interesting, I won't keep on talking because I know we've got a short session, but interestingly, I had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the student union of Plymouth University, but they also had some of the colleges in as well. And the meeting started off a little bit angsty, to be honest. There was obviously a lot of concern from the students, a lot of concern about how police were interacting and what venues were doing. And the question was, what are you doing about drink spiking? Now, when we came out and we told them every step of the way about the scheme that we're running, the fact they can go to door staff, bar staff, look out for these signs, these venues that are taking part, police will now always believe you because they have this working practice in place. At the end of the meeting, they were absolutely over the moon. They were fully on board, and they were going to pass that message out to the student union that going out to venues, is safer because they have these things in place. So at the moment, it's an opportunity, I think, for the industry to jump on board and say, yes, we will believe you. Yes, we will report. If you're unhappy, we will report things to the police. Now, this at the moment, what we're doing here, as Mike quite rightly says, is not a silver bullet. The tests won't test for every single concoction that would ever be made that could be put into a drink or spiked, or somebody spiked with an injection. So it's not the silver bullet, but it's going some way towards doing that. Now, I know the NPCC are working on a more of a national strategy and looking with forensic providers in order to find the best possible solution. But at the moment, it's going that way. It's showing the public, first and foremost, that we're taking it seriously. It's showing perpetrators that if you go into your nighttime economy venues, it is going to be more difficult to ply your trade. The chances of getting caught are going to be a little bit higher. So are you going to take that risk? If somebody's spiking drinks with ketamine, if someone goes into a nightclub with ketamine, then they're going to have to answer other questions. Because what we have at the moment, someone goes in with a tablet, they're not likely to get arrested because generally Code G says, okay, we'll speak to you in a week or two, unless there's evidence that they're going to be dealing, we need search powers and stuff. But if somebody goes in with something that's been used through all of the research that we're doing as a spiking drug, then they are going to be arrested. There are going to be searches made of their premises to see if this is something that they're doing. There's more difficult questions to answer. So we are going, I think we're going certainly the right way, but I think it has to be a partnership between the police, between the trade, and between the other authorities as well, because everybody working together, singing the same message and saying, this is what we are doing to give you confidence back in reporting these incidents, will really, really help change that narrative. Because we have noticed there has been a decline in Devon and Cornwall in the social media posts going up. Now, I haven't got a quantification of that at the moment, but we've certainly seen a lot less social media posts going up with people saying they've been spiked. So they're getting tested, they're coming back negative, and they're not going home and saying, I was spiked last night. Now that is hopefully dampening that fuel, or dampening the fire of fear of crime at the moment. And that is what we really want to get to. We want people to be confident to report, but we also want to remove or reduce that fear of crime, particularly in a nighttime economy where those capable guardians are to look after people. Is that okay, OJ?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, Dave. That's brilliant. And, you know, for everybody on the call as well, it's important to note that Dave has been really proactive on this, looking at this issue long before it's been in the press in recent weeks. And I think it's that proactive work that has given us a foundation, and also others in the industry a foundation, to be able to take this template and do, as Dave said, it's about giving everybody confidence, from the users of the evening and nighttime economy to police, to venues and venue staff. Everybody has that confidence to move forward, and that ability to generate that better intelligence as well. So I've just learned about the concentration around university towns. I didn't even realize that before. That's how important this data collection is. So Dave, that's fantastic. Just to touch on some of the comments that have come in the chat box. So Shrewsbury have said that in relation to a hesitancy in people going to the police to report potential drink spiking, there is also the possibility, it might not just be a lack of trust in the police itself, issues like the Sarah Everard case, which is a challenge, but also other challenges, such as there may be some people that have already used drugs earlier in the evening, and so therefore do not necessarily want to be tested, and so might be happy to talk about having their drink spiked, but might not necessarily be comfortable in being tested.
One of those interesting things, OJ, sorry to interrupt, is that it is a thing, because we have had a number of people decline tests over the last 3 months. It's not a massive percentage, but it's a significant enough percentage. So what we have said to the universities is, if they feel free that they want to put an email out to students with regards to this, that if they had taken a drug, then and it's in their system, then it's no offence of a possession of a controlled drug. And that's one of the concerns I think some students have, is they think they're committing an offence if it's in their system. We obviously can't say that as the police, put that out as a message, because that would obviously sound very bad and very wrong from a political point of view, I suppose. But the universities can say that there is no offence if you have something in your system. So it's almost to give people the confidence. And we have had a number of tests that have come back with people showing that they have had voluntary drugs in their system, but they're not showing for anything else. So it's really just to catch that percentage of people who feel concerned, but it is a real concern, absolutely. Yeah.
That's really useful to know. And then comment from Derry on the issue of raising awareness with people and giving them the knowledge and skills they need to be able to deal confidently with the issue. One of the things they've looked to do in Derry is organise an awareness event which uses local police, local doctors from the A&E department, and invite staff from hotels, bars, restaurants, security, anybody that will be interacting with the general public, to be able to allow them to be able to identify the signs of potential drink spiking and then how to respond accordingly. So that sounds really interesting. That sounds useful. Now, certainly in terms of the awareness aspect, we know there's a clear role to play with BIDS, who have an excellent engagement with the private sector in their area. And I think this is where the work in Bristol I have been really impressed with and actually picked up because it's been so visible. So that's why I've invited Keith, who sits on our Purple Flag panel, to discuss about the origins of the work and how they've gone about that issue of engagement with the business community and the general public. So Keith, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, OJ. A couple of things first, maybe, that none of this works without a partnership. Nothing anybody's spoken about works without a partnership. So it doesn't work for any one agency or any group on their own. And the other issue, which goes back to what both Dave and Michael have said, is there is no venue that doesn't want to be safe. So the one thing that we've never found is a venue that doesn't want to engage, particularly in this. So, this overall, at a starting point, is a fairly easy win. So a quick credit to Dave, because his was, when we started this back in May, the only bit of data, the only bit of research, the only bit of evidence we could find in a trawl was Devon and Cornwall's trial. So we borrowed it and then started working from that to work out what we were going to do. And it is the most significant issue with this challenge, is that there isn't any reliable evidence, data sets, any understanding of the prevalence of the splits between the different types of spiking that range through the drugs, the alcohol, etc. There's about 3 or 4 different types that are currently recognised, and injections are now the newest one to come through. And there's no real clarity on the balance of reporting against social media, against reality. So one part of, I know what Dave's doing, and we're going to get some emerging data from him. We've got our first emerging data meeting on Monday to establish what we've got and what is going on in there. And then the other challenge that was identified first of all is that there's a very variable level of understanding in what to do. And that's across the industry, it's across, to some extent, the police, it's across the population, certainly amongst customers. So when we picked up on this, one of the first decisions that we made here in Bristol, and here the partnership is between the City Council, ourselves, we run 3 of the business improvement districts. So ourselves, the City Council's nighttime advisor, Carly Heath, and Avon and Somerset Police through Chief Inspector Lorna Dallimore. But that partnership then extends more widely in the council, extends to our equivalent Night Watch, Pub Watch, to an organisation that we've got that's a member organisation for bars as well. So it's as wide as we could make it in terms of bringing stuff together, but also not quite so wide that we couldn't get anything done. So we needed to move at reasonable speed, particularly August onwards, when it was clear that the problem was rolling much more quickly than it had been May to August. So our first decision in working out what to do was that this was going to be offender focused. There've always been cups you could put over the top, licensing conditions about don't leave your drink behind, or all the other bits that go with that. All of that effectively says it's the victim's fault, and it's not. This is offender driven, and whether that offender is doing it for a joke, whether that offender is doing it for sexual purposes, robbery purposes, whatever, this sits at the door of the offender. And that's the message that we think is absolutely essential to get across. And in all the market testing of the campaign that we've done, which I've put a link to in the chat, tells us that that's what those potential those customers who are potential victims want to see. The other element that we made sure about was that this was going to be a non-gendered campaign. Because from our LGBTQ plus community, it was clear that there's an existing challenge in there as well. So they were the 2 starting points for us. We were fortunate in that just prior to this campaign, Bristol had also done a Bristol Rules campaign around safety in the nighttime economy with 5 strands on exhorting people on how to behave and what safe looked like in our nighttime economy. So the style was already well received. And the campaign then basically centres around awareness posters, which are reasonably blunt. Stop spiking. We did have one that was ever so slightly more strong than that, but people were not willing to go quite that far in terms of the language that was on a poster in public. Certainly as part of the partnership, but they are there to carry a message. So the posters that say stop spiking are quite explicit that it carries a 10-year sentence, maximum 10-year sentence. The key elements of being able to work with the police, the council and others is that we were able to produce fairly quickly a venue guide. So every venue can download a guide that tells them what to do. Every venue can download the posters. They can print as many as they like. They can put them up wherever they wish, as many times as they like across their venues. But in addition to that, we took the campaign out to them and 200 so far have been given tests and been given poster packs and been given guidance on how it should run. We, however, are aware that you can't do it once. So we already plan to reinvigorate it again on the run up to Christmas, because if we look at inexperienced drinkers, we've just had one influx for freshers and we're going to get another one on the run up to Christmas, because that's traditionally the next time when those who don't drink all year go out and drink quite a lot. So there's a risk period coming there. So I suppose the lessons for us, looking at the time, OJ, I'll try and wrap up fairly quickly, is that if you've got a campaign, if you've got a partnership, if you're clear on what your message wants to be, then most of the venues are going to be receptive if they've been included in what goes on. And it is still absolutely true that they are the best managed place to go drinking. And that has to be propounded in the campaign. We've had masses of media interest and we've continually gone on about that message. Venues are safe. Venues want to be safe. Venues have a desire to be safe. Venues generally are well managed, almost exclusively are well managed and want to engage with this. And with the police on board, if they're not well managed, it's fairly simple to pay some attention to that from the licensing perspective, as Dave's done in Devon and Cornwall, and our licensing team in Bristol have been able to do. So the only challenge that we've had to the work that we've been doing is at one point when the media were massively interested in what we were doing and it was rolling on across Sky and all the rest of it, there was a question that came up at fairly senior levels around, are we badging Bristol as less safe because of our publicity around this? And the answer that satisfied most people was, actually, we're not. What we're saying is we're stepping forward, we're making a safer place, we're telling everybody what the risks are, we're telling them what to do, we're helping them to report it, we're believing the victims, and we're focused on the offenders. And in order for people to come out and feel safe and be safe, you have to be clear on what they can and can't do, was our view and remains our view at the moment. And we continue to put marketing collateral out about it. We continue to get the right tests. We're working with Dave and the test suppliers to get a 13+1 urine test, to add one more to that one, so that, again, we can do that. The police have really engaged with it. We need to order more tests because the police have used theirs up. So they're going out actively across the force area now, not just in Bristol, in order to get those messages through. Really, OJ, I guess that's it. I mean, we're happy to answer questions. We're happy for people to borrow the campaign. We're happy for the system accreditation, if that's okay. I've sent you the downloading links that you can look at and go through. This isn't about being particularly precious about anything. This is about safety. So, you know, we're more than happy to share what we've got. We know that there's been one arrest for spiking in the period that we've been running. And that, if you like, looks like what people think spiking generally is, which is an offence with a relevant drug. And hopefully that will take us to charge and take us to somewhere else. And all of that justifies this campaign in our heads, just one. And it doesn't matter that the toxicology levels are at 5% or whatever else. What we've managed to do is get awareness raised, get people reporting, get people aware of it, make people feel safer, and try and get them to report either to venues or to the police, so that we can get some data and understand different elements of the problem. OJ, back to you.
Steve, that's excellent. There's so much there, and there's so much conversation, so many conversations happening in the chat box as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and bring all the links together and make sure they're shared to everybody on the call. I think one of the things I'll do, Keith, it's clearly from one of the questions. I think you've really picked up on an important point, and it comes from Hannah in Cambridge, also a purple flag city, and that is how you navigate around the challenge of not being in that space of victim blaming. And I think you've explained that well. So what I might do is at some point after the meeting is just put you and Hannah in touch, because I think that would probably be really useful for Cambridge, because I do like that approach.
I suppose just one thing. We market tested this with about 500 customers in the nighttime economy, this campaign, to make sure that the language was right, that the message was right, that it was all lined up for the particular demographic. The particular demographic wanted to read it, not for my demographic, which it's not relevant as much for, but actually that is exactly what they wanted. And various amendments were made to the campaign, the language and the changes to make sure that demographic were receptive to it. So that's also key if there are adaptations to campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. So I encourage everybody. So the link Keith has put up, I do encourage you, take a look at it. Take a look at the campaign, because the way it's communicated is excellent. It really is. Lisa.
Okay, sorry, OJ,
yeah,
can I just jump in for a quick second? Just the point that Keith raised there, with regards to the concern about a city or an area being seen as being dangerous. It's a really important factor. And what we have seen, just from the anecdotal evidence over the last 3 months, from all the logs I've gone through, is that people are seeing it actually as better. They feel safer to go out. There is the confidence now in the students in Plymouth to say, I'm going to go out again. So rather than them seeing, and I know it's always the fear, and we've had that right from the start, from 2 or 3 years ago when we first talked about spiking, it was a thing that people didn't want to raise because the clubs don't like it. It sends the wrong message. But the fact everything is going across so positively now, and we're there for the safety of everyone, we're actually hearing, people want to go out in Bristol, people want to go out in Plymouth, and want to go out in Exeter because they're feeling safer, because there are people there to look after them. So it's actually tipped it on its head because of that cooperation with the venues and with the trade, which has been brilliant. Sorry to interrupt there, mate.
No, that's excellent. That's really useful as well. And on the issue of how best to raise awareness, there's been conversations happening about the use of education within that. So Lisa, can I bring you in? So for everybody who is new to an ATCM call, Lisa Carlson in Canterbury is the chair of ATCM, and Canterbury is also a purple flag destination. So Lisa has some skin in the game. So Lisa, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me, OJ?
Yeah, can hear you.
But also, Canterbury is a university city. We have 3 universities. We have a number of colleges. We have a number of private education around us. We have the highest student to local population sort of ratio in the whole of the UK. Maybe slightly less at the moment because not all the students are here, but nonetheless, this is something we think about all the time. We have a really active community safety unit. A number of them are on this call, and they're going to know a lot more about the hands-on detail, than I am. But we talk about it all the time, and I think it's come up, and I've been having a little chat exchange with someone from Derry, I think, and that's been really interesting about the education side of this. So there's so much that needs to be done, and it's been outlined by our speakers in terms of the ongoing training and promotion and awareness and testing and all of that. But there's an education element that I think is really important that's not the safety messaging that we give students. That has its place, but they tune it out after a while. So it's about how we bring back, for us, because I've been speaking to some people on our community safety unit recently, and this has been done before, but the education side and really bringing in the medical professionals into that, because it perhaps doesn't need to be done by us, by the police, by the statutory authorities. It needs to be done by the medical profession, an element of that, I think. So that's been really interesting, just talking about that recently, and then hearing about it in the chat and on this call as well.
That's again really interesting. So just going through some of the other comments as well. Lisa, you also bring up the point actually about the challenge around NHS capacity and the ability to get toxicology tests done as a matter of course, given some of the challenges the NHS sees at the moment. Do you want to explain a little bit more around that?
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from our speakers as well, because we're talking about testing in venues. What happens to the person who, wherever they come from, they may have been in a venue or in a house party, an unlicensed space, when they get to the hospital? From what I'm hearing, in A&E, their first job is to treat the symptoms and to help the patient, not necessarily to find out, more beyond that. That would be probably from their perspective part of follow-up. But then you miss the opportunity to do that toxicology and to deal with the potential issue. Are other people seeing this, that there is a challenge in NHS capacity, actually also in terms of delivering the kind of training I was just talking about? What can we do now, given that environment we're all in terms of reduced capacity in the NHS?
Can I come in there?
Yeah, great, thanks, Dave.
Yeah, because we've just struck up an agreement now with the South West Ambulance Trust. They're more than happy for any calls that they receive, that they will make contact with us if it's initial spiking to the control centre, but also they've got a direct line to our control centre for ambulance crews who turn up, so we don't miss any instances where people may have just called it up as a medical issue as opposed to a policing issue. So we're just putting that agreement in place, which we're hoping to run from the 1st of December. I'll touch basically with that on that with Keith, because obviously SWAS cover you as well. So I'll be in contact with on that one. I've also spoken to all of the main emergency departments in our force area, and what we're looking to do is to get a protocol together with how this is going to be treated, because again, the feedback that we've had so far is actually the NHS, for the first time ever, I think, are looking worse than us. We're getting some really good praise from alleged victims, saying the police, the venues have been brilliant, but when we went to A&E, they wouldn't do anything about it. They wouldn't take any bloods. They're not doing anything about it. And so people are being unhappy about the medical treatment they're particularly receiving. And obviously the drain on A&E, or not the drain, the situation with A&E at the moment with the volume of work they have, is significant. So we're looking to just put something together that will work with emergency departments as well, which will tie us all together and hopefully reduce the workload for everybody while still getting the best possible results.
OJ, just I guess on that bit, what I think what we're all trying to deal with here, Lisa, is this is new. Nothing's going to be perfect, and we just have to keep extending. What we've got is, or what we believe we've got in Bristol, what Dave's got in Plymouth, in Devon and Cornwall, is a good base from which to build. And because it's a reasonably professional product in both places, other agencies are more than happy to start coming on board. So our universities are in, all the rest, and we've only been running a month, so you can get a picture where Dave's got it to the ambulance service within 3 months. That if other places start to do this as well, then it will become easier the further down we go, and the partnerships will get stronger and bigger over time. So everything about this for me just feels a positive and just a winner for everybody.
Yeah, I think once we've got that working, I think once we've got that working model, it becomes very easy for anybody else to jump on board. And that's where, where Keith and I are working together, or working together with yourself, all that partnership working, it gets that message out. And the platform is here. It's just like jump on and just use it, adapt it to your own force area or your own bid area, and it's there, so it's easy just to jump on, really.
I totally agree, and I don't think so. For 2 or 3 years now, Purple Flag has had its universities and colleges program. In the past few weeks, we've seen probably more interest from universities than I've ever seen, and I think it's just a recognition that partnership's the way forward, and that getting involved in schemes like this is just a win-win-win situation for everyone, in terms of that intelligence, in terms of that confidence, and making sure people know they feel safe. So
OJ,
yep, go for it.
Can I just pick up on Jason Maxwell's question earlier on about getting the message to customers and to go to door staff? So from our point of view, there's a lot of posters in there, and we individually went round to venues to tell them exactly how to run that, to make sure that you could talk to there is some social media, but predominantly it's been face-to-face and explanations, and police licensing are reinforcing that message as well. And the venues, I think I went to the best attended night watch meeting we've ever had to give the briefing on this. So, there is a huge appetite out there. I think all the door companies were present. So hopefully, Jason, Gloucester will be as easy as everywhere else to get that message through.
Sorry to jump in again. I've also had contact with regional SIA manager. This was only yesterday, that the SIA are really interested in what we can offer the whole of the SIA, which they can then introduce themselves as a training package. So that might be a really good catch-all, that we can capture all door staff by working through the SIA. So again, I'll touch base on that one, Keith. That's all right.
Yeah,
that sounds great, guys. That's it's a really good example of partnership working, and how a proactive thinking is able to solve some otherwise quite challenging issues for industry and people alike. So I'm really grateful for the time you put into this, for the work you've done, and also for contributing that knowledge to this meeting and being so willing to share that best practice across the network as well. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to call the meeting to an end. Just before everybody goes, there is another side to this story, which we will be exploring before the end of the year. So if we can pull up my slides. Right, can everybody see that? So ATCM has extended its work with the Home Office on violence and vulnerability. So this is taking a look at the issue of county lines and the actual expansion of the drugs market through urban gangs from the big cities out into smaller towns and rural areas and universities, etc., etc. Now, this is a real challenge, and our expectation is this particular issue is going to get more challenging post-pandemic, because ultimately these gangs rely on recruiting kids who feel like they are on the fringes, on the margins of society. And given the pandemic has disrupted both the economic and education opportunities for kids and young adults, we feel like there might be fertile ground for some of these gangs to grow. Home Office is concerned. Home Office has wanted to extend the programme. So we're going to be looking at learnings from the Violence and Vulnerability Unit on the 14th of December. It's promoted as an ATCM England meeting. If you are not in England, but you are still interested, then feel free to jump on board for this meeting. I will circulate the link to register for this meeting in due course. 10 o'clock to 11:30. We'll have the Violence and Vulnerability Programme Director with us, and we'll look at some best practice in the operation of Violence and Vulnerability Unit in terms of supporting place managers to identify any potential challenges they may have with county lines in their area, and how to protect those people who may be vulnerable in their area. And like I say, it's another part of this wider story. So that being said, everybody, thank you very much for attending this important meeting. Excellent contributions from all of our speakers, Mike, Dave, and Keith, and all the contributors, and all the conversations that's happened in the chat box as well. Really useful. I hope to catch up with you all soon, and I hope you all enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much, everyone.